Hello, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And this will be our third installment in our examination of understanding that which was not understood. Now, maybe a few of you have pondered and wondered, why is he spending so much time on this? Well, the reason I'm spending so much time on it is because as I have shared very, very often in this ongoing series, one of the most fundamental and fundamentally important to the future's paradigm views is that when Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, that the apostles were immediately astounded, stunned, and confused. In their confusion, they connected that fall of Jerusalem with Christ's coming and the end of the age. But of course, they were confused, we are told. If they weren't confused, they were just simply ignorant of what the Old Testament teaches and of what Jesus taught. Because in the future's paradigm, there's no connection, no linkage, no conflation between the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 and Christ coming in the end of the age. I never forget in one formal public debate that I had with John Welch in Indianapolis, I believe the year was 2008 if I'm not mistaken, John Welch got up and he said, why would the folks in Corinth, 800 miles away from Jerusalem, have cared about the destruction of Jerusalem? Why would the people in Athens have cared? Jerusalem was just a troublesome city full of Jewish zealots and blah, blah, blah. Why would anybody have cared? And so he talked about the apostles ignorantly conflating that fall of Jerusalem with the end of the age. The end of the age is the end of time, the end of the current Christian age, Welch taught, and had nothing to do with an inconsequential, unimportant fall of a rebel Jewish city. Well, in the first place, as I pointed out in the debate, John Welch just simply didn't understand the Jewish mindset. He was looking at Jerusalem from the perspective of an American middle-class citizen. He was not looking at the fall of Jerusalem through the prism and through the eyes of an ancient Jew, for whom Jerusalem was considered, quote, the perfection of beauty, unquote, Psalms chapter 50. Jerusalem was considered to be, quote, the navel of the world, unquote, Ezekiel chapter 5, 8, and 9. And it's rather naive, and may I also say it's ignorant, for someone today to say no Jew in the first century would have ever cared about the fall of Jerusalem, or for that matter, no Gentile in the first century would have ever cared about the fall of Jerusalem. That betrays either a woeful ignorance or a woeful purposeful ignorance. I won't make the judgment as to which, but the point of fact is it portrays and betrays a horrible ignorance of the first century thought concerning Jerusalem. Listen, in my book, Who is This Babylon? I demonstrate even Romans in the city of Rome admired the city of Jerusalem and said that people traveled from all over the world to see that city. So once again, those who want to speak of the confusion and the ignorance of the apostles, to the extent that they would automatically conclude that the fall of Jerusalem had to be at the end of the world, meaning that they were imposing their own ignorant view of the city of Jerusalem onto eschatology. That's a horrible, horrible presupposition on the part of modern exegetes. Now then, my position is the apostles were absolutely correct to join in their mind the fall of Jerusalem with the coming of the Lord and the end of the age. Oh, by the way, you know what's ironic? I've had post-millennialists tell me, why would the Jews care about, or why would anybody care about the fall of Jerusalem? Or why would anybody think that the coming of the Lord, the judgment, was in AD 70 at the destruction of Jerusalem? Why would anybody think that? Those same individuals turn right around and they tell us, well, you know what? The Lord came in AD 70. He came on the clouds with power and great glory. He came with the angels. He came with a shout. And he gathered together the elect. Matthew 24, 29 to 31. So on the one hand, the very same people disparage and condemn the idea of linking the fall of Jerusalem with the coming of the Lord. And on the other hand, they turn right around and say, AD 70 was the coming of the Lord on the clouds of heaven in power and great glory. Confusion reigns. But I must hurry. I want you to keep in mind, every time I do that, I have to readjust my laptop here. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that if the apostles were not confused to link the coming of the Lord and the end of the age, if those eschatological tenets are in fact linked, then it is the modern day exegetes that are the ones that are confused. And let me illustrate that by giving a modern example of what I call argumentum ad desperatum. There are some former preterists who are now saying, in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15 and following, Jesus, even though he was speaking about his apostles, or speaking to his apostles, that's a bit misleading, because he wasn't really talking about their day and their time, except on a very, very limited perspective. Okay? Here's what I mean. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, let the one who reads understand. Okay, as I pointed out in the two previous videos on understanding that which is not understood, I pointed out Jesus said to his living, breathing apostles, when you see, flee. When you see what? Flee. When you see what Daniel spoke about. And yet, these former preterists are saying, no. They were not going to see what Daniel spoke about. They were not going to see the abomination of desolation, because Daniel was actually predicting the abomination of desolation that occurred in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. They were to see something in their generation that would remind them of what Daniel talked about, of what happened in the days of Antiochus Epiphanes. And because they were supposed to see something similar to what Daniel foretold, then they were to flee. Well, in the first place, Jesus had lots and lots of verbs, both in Hebrew, Aramaic, or in Greek, to say, when you see something similar to what happened in the days of Antiochus Epiphanes, then flee. But notice what he actually said. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So on some level, it is admitted Daniel did predict the abomination of desolation. Of course, we're told that happened in the days of Antiochus Epiphanes. But wait a minute. Jesus told his apostles, when you see the abomination, not something like it, not something similar to it, when you see the abomination spoken of by Daniel the prophet, now watch this, stand in the holy place, let the one who reads understand. Now let's go back to Daniel really quickly to establish this point. Daniel was told in his prophecy of the abomination of desolation and the great tribulation. Daniel sealed the prophecy until the time of the end. So, Daniel's prophecy of the abomination, Daniel's prophecy of the great tribulation, was sealed until the time of the end. The wicked would not understand, but the wise would understand. When? In the time of the end. Daniel sealed the words of this vision, for it is for the time of the end, and knowledge shall be increased. So, here's Daniel predicting the abomination of desolation, and its significance, its application, its meaning would not be known until the time of the end. But the abomination was supposed to happen. The great tribulation was supposed to occur, according to these former preterists, in the days of Antiochus Epiphanes. That should mean, ladies and gentlemen, that Daniel's book was unsealed and understood in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. It should mean that the time of Antiochus Epiphanes was the time of the end. But it wasn't, was it? It wasn't the time when the power of the holy people was completely shattered, Daniel chapter 12 and verse 7. It was not the time of the great tribulation, because as I have pointed out many times before, the pogrom under Antiochus Epiphanes did not approach that in the time of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, 586 BC. It didn't hold a candle to the desolation and the destruction and the death of AD 70. And yet the great tribulation of Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 was supposed to be the greatest tribulation such as has never been or ever yet shall be. I'm sorry, the time of Antiochus Epiphanes does not match that. So you see, Daniel was told his vision of the abomination was to be sealed until the time of the end. In the time of the end, it would be understood. Jesus told his apostles, when you see what Daniel foretold, then then understand. Let the one who reads understand. Well, they should have had understanding of Daniel in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, if this new argument has any merit. But Jesus is very clearly, undeniably, explicitly appointing understanding to his generation, to his apostles, in regard to what Daniel saw. No understanding in the days of Antiochus Epiphanes, no time of the end in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, but in the first century, when you see what was spoken, let the one who read understand, and this generation will not pass until all of these things are fulfilled. Folks, do you see how those who are former preterists have to literally manipulate, distort, and pervert, number one, history, and number two, scriptures? Bottom line, Jesus's apostles were not confused. It's one of the reasons I wrote my book, Watching for the Parousia, Were Jesus's Apostles Confused? Don't forget, for the rest of the month of May 2022, my book, Were the Apostles Confused? And Paul on Trial, in which we are told once again about the confusion of the apostles. These two books, okay, total delivered price $25. It would cost you well over $35 if you ordered them separately and paid shipping separately. So go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Beautiful banner right up at the top, put there by my wonderful webmaster. Go there and click the banner, order the two books. You'll be glad you did. Okay, thank you so very much for joining me on this morning's Morning Musings. I will see you on the flip side.